Everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the Promotional Process Candidate Workshop. So right now is only the candidates in the classroom for this pre-briefing, and then the second part will be the class. Just as cap off, the week of March 14th will be the actual process. We haven't finalized the times on those yet and the dates. That's something that HR, myself and Terry and Tim will be working on next week. And just as a reminder, as part of that process, not only what you do, but then afterwards there'll be a performance review, there'll be an examination of the personnel file, a validation of performance and competencies. So we thought this was really important to bring in, not only in this class to make everybody successful in this room to compete for this test, but also to help build leadership skills within the organization. And that's one of the reasons why we opened the second part out. For everybody that's interested, because there's other people besides sworn members, and there's just not a lot of classes out there. So we'll have about 24 people coming up in the second half. So if you have any questions, Terry is here with SkillWorks, and Jed went to go get something else out of the car, so I can't introduce him. Are there any questions before I kick it over? All right,
thank you very much. Well, good morning and welcome. Thank you for being here so early. I'm Terry Kerwood with SkillWorks. Jed is not with the test part at all. He's a co-trainer and facilitator on the workshop this afternoon, so he may not come back until we're ready to go with that part of it. But I do want to welcome here. This is a big commitment, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. It shows your commitment and dedication to the process, and it's a good thing. So I have a handout, but I need to know who's going for what. So we'll start with the sergeant candidate. Who's a sergeant candidate? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. And our lieutenant candidates would be everybody else, I'm thinking. Probably everyone else. 1. Did I miss anybody? You're all sergeant?
Oh. Sorry.
4.
I'm sitting going, where's my water bottle?
6.
Why the Dale came in and sat down?
Okay, so this is a behavioral-based process, right? So one of the things that we're going to be examining, and we'll be working a lot on this in the workshop too, is what is that and how does it work? So I'll do a little bit of teaching on that in the briefing, and then we'll cover a little more ground later today. But the briefing is really about the test. The workshop is not test specific. It's more about professional development and leadership in general. One of the things that's important to know, so you may leave today and have some questions, and I'll try not to move around too much for the video, but you may have some questions. If you do, send them to Tim, and so email Tim any questions you have. And you have up until about a week before, let's just say a week before the test, the beginning of the testing for your part of the process. So a week before the lieutenant's test, the lieutenants can submit questions to Tim. A week before the first day of sergeant testing, the sergeant candidates can send their questions to Tim. If you email your question, he'll send them to me, and then we'll review them. We'll draft a response. And Chief Durr probably will be in the loop on that. And then we'll send the answer to your question and the question out to everybody at the same time, right? And it doesn't have, nobody needs to know who asked the question or anything. So part of our goal in this is to not surprise anybody. This is a process to look at what you've done and how that compares to what the department needs in the future. And it's a promotional process. It's not about hiding anything. It's a very transparent. One of the things you should admire about the department, this is a very, it's a transparent process. They're telling you what is important to them. So If you do have questions, send it. We'll do the best we can to answer that. But you need to do that through the process, because what we don't want is we don't want one person to get information that the other folks don't have, and we want them all. We want you to get it all at the same time. And I'm following a little bit of a script for the briefing, especially today, because I want to make sure I hit all the points, and I want to make sure that I do it consistently for everybody. So the briefing today and the instruction packet that I've handed out are meant to be used in tandem, right? So there's information that's going to be in the briefing that's not in the packet. There's information in the packet that's not in the briefing, and you'll want to use both as you prepare. And one of the things that I've seen over the years is I've seen candidates come into a process and under-communicate their case. And so I think the workshop today and everything will talk a lot about communication, and that'll be helpful. So you want to pay attention to the briefing and the instructions, but it's really about what you've done that counts. So open your briefing handout to the first page, which is, oh sorry, I move a lot when I talk, so bear with me. And can you hear me okay? Is the sound check all right?
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
So these competencies, we'll be testing on behavioral-based tests based on these competencies in any combination. So you prepare for the whole list, because you won't know until test day which ones are going to be included. And they will not be provided again on the day of the test. So you've got to understand what's in there. And guess what? There's a side benefit, and we'll talk about this later today too. The side benefit is that in the process of preparing for this, you're going to learn a lot about what's important to operate at that next level. So there's a side benefit to that. So think of your accomplishments and what you've done in terms of your experiences as it relates to these competencies that are listed in your packet. As you prepare, think about what you've done, what results you've achieved, and situations you've been in that relate to those competencies, okay? And we want you to prepare and respond using the SARA interviewing model. And I know there's a SARA police, I think it's a problem-solving model for police. But this is the SARA interviewing model, and SARA stands for situation, actions, results, and application, right? So the first S in SARA is the situation, okay? The situation. And what the panel, the raters, I call them raters, R-A-T-E-R-S, and the raters are going to be looking for a relevant situation, right? So it needs to be relevant to the position you're applying for, relevant to the competency that we're assessing, and relevant to the question that we are asking. So relevant to the position, what does that look like? Well, maybe you haven't been maybe you haven't acted out of class. Maybe you haven't been an acting sergeant or an acting lieutenant and operated at that next level. But you can get clues about what that looks like from the competency statements. Think about situations that you've been in that as close as you can represent and be relevant to what a lieutenant might do or a sergeant might do. And look for those transferable skills, ability, and knowledge, those items that are lieutenant-like or sergeant-like as you've gone throughout your career. Okay, so one of the things when we develop the test questions, we ask, is it fair and reasonable? Are people have a reasonable opportunity to have had that experience? So we pick relevant questions and that are fair, right? And we pick job-related questions. So you'll find clues in the competency statements about what is fair and relevant, right? So think of those experiences that are relevant. I'll give you an example. If the question is about, tell me about a time when, you've been on a call and it represented what you would do as a lieutenant if you were in that position later, you wouldn't bring up something that a rookie probationary officer would do the first day on their job and make it a very narrow scope. It doesn't represent that higher level thinking and skills and abilities that a supervisor or a lieutenant would bring, right? So think of relevant to the position. Relevant to the competency, so what does that look like? Well, it's got to relate to something that's in the competency statement. It's job related. We're giving you guidance through those competency statements about what's important to the organization, what is important for a lieutenant and a sergeant, and those clues are embedded in the competency statement. So your response should be relative and related to, relevant rather, not relative, it should be relevant to content that you find in what's described in the competency statement. That's job related, right? And then it should be relevant to the question asked. Here's what can happen sometimes. Candidates, they prepare like crazy, but, and they come up, they think in their head what we're going to ask about, and they get there, and the question isn't what they prepared for, and so they get a stumbling block. So the more broad experiences that you can think of in those competencies, within those competencies, and the more you prepare, and the more examples you can think of, and then think of some that are in general, the better job you do of that, the more prepared that you're going to be to answer any question that we might ask. I've heard before that, wow, I didn't expect you to ask that. And so don't be locked into what you think we're going to ask, because it may not look like that once you get there. So, but when you look at the question, now here's just a procedural note. You're going to get the questions in advance the day of the test. You'll have an average of about 5 minutes per question to prepare. You'll have a place to take notes, and we'll cover this again later. You'll have a place to take notes, and you can bring your notes in with you. So it's not like this is going to be out of the blue. You will have had a month or so to prepare, or several weeks here to prepare. You'll get the questions in advance. If you've done your homework and you really have thought about your career, you should be able to make it relevant to the competency statement, and relevant to the question, and relevant to the position that you're seeking, right? So the situation should be relevant. It should also be specific, right? So it should be specific. It should look like a documentary. If you were describing a documentary film, you would be able to talk about your experience in a way that when the raters are listening to it, they can see the movie playing in their mind. It should be enough detail so that they could actually see it as if they were there. And you could think of it this way. If you were describing in court, and you were describing in detail something that happened to you, you would provide enough supporting detail about what you did, not somebody else, but what you did, in order to paint a picture like they were watching a movie, so the judge or jury could hear what you were saying, and there would be plenty of supporting detail, so there's no doubt about what happened. Right? I mean, is that fair? I mean, you would do that, right? That's what we're looking for here. The raters are looking for evidence. They're looking for evidence of what you have done and the results you've achieved in your career. So it should be specific. If you talk about your philosophy, support, like I think leadership is this, provide supporting detail about when you've done something that actually matches your philosophy. Don't leave them hanging with a philosophical statement. It won't score as well. Provide enough, I already said that. Be clear enough so they can see your actions, the circumstances, and the results. So choosing the right situation, a relevant situation, relevant to the question, the competency, and the position being applied for, will demonstrate your ability to perform at the next level, not just the one that you're at, right? So you want to demonstrate that you've done things that show that you're ready to perform at that next level. And what does that look like? Well, you can look at the competency statements, and it will tell you a lot about what operating at that next level looks like, okay? All right, so now the other thing is, when you read the competency statements, another little tip here, I've seen on a number of occasions where when people study the competencies and they look at what's important, they look at those things from the perspective through their own eyes, and they assume that they know what they mean because, well, you're all smart people. It's important, and we'll cover this in detail later today, but it's important that you also look at those things as to how they're defined from your employer's level. And your perspective, your employer's perspective, because guess what? Who's sitting on the panel? They're probably going to be, well, I think they're all law enforcement, if I remember right. We're doing all law enforcement on the panel, and they'll all be at or above the grade that you're applying to, right? So it's important that you understand how those competencies are defined from the next level's perspective. Okay, that's as much as you can do to help prepare for that. So do your homework, right? know as much as you can about the position and the expectations of the department to help you connect what you've done to what the department needs and perspective might be. All right, the more that you understand that, I think it gives you a better chance of picking relevant examples. It is, as a candidate, it is your responsibility to ensure that the panel understands how your example demonstrate competency for the position you're aspiring to at that organization, not somewhere else. So I'd say that because if you use sometimes maybe a military example or an outside example, or maybe you were a coach, or I mean, I don't know what it might be, but maybe it's not, the most relevant example might not be something that you've done in the department. Well, that's okay to use that if it's your best example. Normally, it's best to use recent and relevant examples from here, from when you're doing, from what you've done at EPD. But if it is an outside example, then you must build a bridge of relevance for the rater panel. Don't leave them wondering how what you did elsewhere, how that relates to what you've done here. For example, I coached a Little League team and I learned a lot about mentoring and coaching, and here's what I did in that circumstance. And when I was supervising people here at the department, I used that experience. And for example, one time there was a situation where, and I did this and I did this, and so bring it current and relevant if you use an outside example, right? Just help them build that. Don't leave the panel wondering, why did they use that example? Or is that as the most relevant thing? They've been here, they're applying to be a sergeant or a lieutenant. Why would they use that? It's really something basic that anyone at an entry level would do. I've heard that a lot, so there's a big tip for it. I already mentioned, I'll say it again, use research to discover what's important to your employer. Look at the competency statements and so on. Find out what their perspectives are. Now, okay, so that's the situation, right? That's the S in Sarah. Pick a relevant situation, relevant to competency, the question, and the position applied for. Next are the actions, okay? So the A in Sarah, the first A in Sarah, are your actions, your actions. And again, as if you were testifying to provide evidence in an important situation, you would use I statements and active verbs, right? If you were in court, you probably wouldn't say, I kinda went and maybe saw the person at when I went on the DV call, I kinda talked to him, I sort of talked to him. I like talk to him. You probably wouldn't say that, right? You would say, I went to the door, I knocked, I went in, I talked to the person, whatever you do on that call, you would be specific using I statements and active verbs. An active verb is, you can see, again, you're painting that documentary picture. I built, I ran, I saw, I conquered, I lifted. You can see those things because they're active. The more active verbs you bring into the process, the more you'll paint that picture of relevance for the rater team. As opposed to, I would build, I could build, I kind of build. If someone says, I always do something, does that really tell what they really do? You need to be specific. Pick specific actions and specific circumstances as much as you can. And again, provide enough detail to clearly establish what you did in that circumstance, okay? Now, I know there are some people who work in teams and they're hesitant to talk about themselves. We get that, I get that. And in this process, it's as if you're testifying or you're providing evidence. If I came to you and I said, I have credibility because we did, and then I went and I used we statements throughout my testimony, you can't be certain for sure whether I did it or somebody on my team did it. So we statements, if you talk about a team activity, a team result, it's great to give credit to other people. It's great to do that. It's great. Teamwork is great. We're not saying that teams are not important and critical, but within the scope of that team activity, you need to discuss what your actions were, what your contributions were, so that the raters are clear for what evidence they can get about what you did. Right? The raters are looking for SARA-related situation action results application. They're looking for evidence of your behaviors, your contribution, your results. So you've got to be clear about that. You should be clear about that to score well. This is important because just like in a court case where you're providing evidence, you're providing evidence to a team of people who take it seriously that they're trying to select the best qualified candidates for the position. It's not a small matter for them. Every Raider team I've ever worked with, they take it as serious as anything they do. It's important. So you're providing that strong evidence. One of the great, I think, writers, C.S. Lewis, said, humility isn't thinking little about yourself. It's just thinking about yourself less, right? So knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, knowing what you've done, knowing what your accomplishments are, and articulating them in a humble way is fine. It's not bragging, right? We'll find out later today, we'll do a little practice. And if you think using I statements all the time is bragging, you'll find that the people that they do it in practice, and then we ask the people around them, was that bragging? No one ever says yes. Okay. Sure, I covered that. The Raiders are not all going to be from the department. Usually there's some outside folks on the panel. So if you use jargon that maybe, watch out carefully. Always explain what those things mean. I've seen people really get tripped up in an interview, and they talk about a special assignment or a committee they were on, and it's just full of acronyms that nobody on the Raider panel has any clue what they're talking about. So watch out for the use of jargons. Consider the competency descriptions. And look at, next, the results, the R in serif, okay? The results. Again, this is important because a lot of people miss this. They give a great result that has absolutely nothing to do with the question, right? For example, we're asking about your teamwork skills, right? And how you improved a team, for example, right? And we want to know what you did to improve a team activity. And you give an example of when you went on a call and the kidnapper was apprehended, the child was saved, the money was recovered, and it was an amazing bit of tactical police work, the best ever in the history of the city, and you got a commendation by the chief and the mayor. It was the mayor's daughter. All those things were amazing. And it was a great result, but the result had nothing to do with how the team how your actions improved the team. You wouldn't score a good result on that, right? Great result, but irrelevant. So your result needs to be relevant to the question we've asked. When you read the questions and you get them to prepare in advance, ask yourself, what result are they really looking for here? Okay, and the results are normally, the clues for that are found in the question and the competency statement. So you need to know both when you're going in. The results should be from your effort. If it's a team and it was a team result, that's great. But what part did you play? What did you contribute to that team effort? Okay, that's important. It should be relevant to the competency, and it should be relevant to the position that you're applying for. If a high-performing sergeant or lieutenant was in that same circumstance, would you expect the same kind of result? That higher level thinking sort of result. Okay, tie the results back to the question is the big thing. Also, on results, it might be helpful and important for some people to validate your results or to substantiate them, that you provide some data to support what you did, right? It's not enough maybe to say, I reduced crime in the neighborhood. Well, okay, by how much? How much did it come down? How quicker were your response times? What did you do? And provide any data that you can. In some cases, if it's connected to the question you were asked and your response, if you can bring data, that would be a good thing too. So describe as much evidence of the result to show you were responsible for the result and that you achieved what the question requested. Okay. Finally, on the SARE model is the application. And the easiest way to explain this is you need to let the panel know, okay, either by what you say you need to prove it, or just come out and say it. My actions and results qualify me for this position because I did this, and this, and that's what a lieutenant would do. I did this, and this, and that's what a sergeant would do. So you need to show how your actions and results qualified you for the position. met the competency, and answered the question. And how you do that, I mean, some people follow a structured SARA format, and they do fine. Other people follow that, and they don't provide all the supporting detail, and they don't do as well. This is not about following some formula here. I'm just giving I'm giving it to you in a formula so that you know what's expected. But in the end, you have to deliver a relevant situation, relevant actions, relevant results, and you have to demonstrate by your response that you met the competency, answered the question, and that you're qualified to get promoted, right? I mean, that's the best way for the panel to say, yeah, this is the person we want. Based on that answer, we would hire that, we would promote that person tomorrow based on that response. You shouldn't leave them wondering whether they should. It's up to you to prove that you gave them relevant situation, action, results, and that what you did applied to the position. Now, we see people come in sometimes and they say, maybe it's a leadership question, and they say in the application piece, leadership is important because that's what leaders do, and the panel knows why leadership is important, or why responsibility, or whatever the other competency is that we're assessing. They know that already. They're not looking for that. And this is important. They're looking for how your actions and results met the competency, answered the question, and qualify you. I repeat this because a lot of candidates miss it. I come into the briefing and I repeat it, and people still don't make their case. Again, if you're in court, you'd have to make your case about what you did and why it was the legal and right thing to do. We're looking for that level of evidence here, that it applies. Okay, so now, you've got the SARA model in your handout. Situation, action, results, and application, right? So that's an important thing. Okay, now turn the page. Let's take a look at the scoring model, which includes the scoring categories, the dimensions for scoring, and actually, it's not the dimensions, sorry. The scoring categories and possible points. The 4 categories of scoring. And so I'm connecting, when you look at how these things are scored by the raters, I'm helping you connect that SARA model. They're scoring your results up to 10 points per question. They're scoring the relevance of your response up to 10 points per question. They're scoring whether you followed instructions up to 10 points per question. And they're scoring your actions up to 40 points. So you can see what is this really about? It's about the evidence you bring that you did things that matter. So the bulk of your score has to do with your actions. It's the most important part. You got to bring that, and results actually bring credibility to your response. So if you look at just actions and results, that's the bulk of it right there. It's 50 out of 70 points per question. So each question has a total of 70 points, and and just as a remander, the situation, action, results, and application. If you look at the scoring model, we're scoring results, relevance. So were your actions relevant? Were your results relevant? And did you follow instructions? Did you give us a relevant situation, action, results, and how it qualifies you? That's what they're scoring. Okay, and I'll just skip that because we covered it pretty well. Follows instruction score is pretty straightforward. Okay. Did you answer all parts of the question, use relevant examples, give supporting behavioral detail, provide relevant results, and explain or demonstrate how it applies and qualifies? And did you manage your time well? So that's the last piece on the following instructions. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But how you manage your time in the interview also is one little teeny piece of what they look for. And I've seen it where people talk for the whole 30 or 35 minutes and they say nothing. Right? So it's not about filling time, but did you give them everything they needed in the time allotted? Did you struggle with your time management? Did you run out of time? Did you leave a lot of time on the table and still not give them evidence? So they're looking for time management. And time management starts in the prep room. Right? So we give you the questions in advance, and I've seen it before where I'll get 5 really good responses from a candidate, and then they bomb out on the last 1 or last 2 questions. And when you look at the handout where they took notes, great notes for the first 5 questions, and then almost nothing for the last one. So their time management was the issue. they had good situations, good actions, good results for the early ones, but when they went to prepare, they probably ran out of time because their prep page was blank, right? So manage your time, know how long, about 5 minutes per question to prepare and 5 minutes to answer, know how long that is. So you get an average of 5 minutes, and I'll talk about the time in a minute. Again, I'm going to just repeat this because it's missed. I statements, you know, the humble, team activity is fine, be humble, but be clear about what you did, and use I statements and active verbs about those parts of your response that demonstrate your behavior. Here's another thing, repeating the buzzwords in the competency statement is not going to do it. The raters are trained to look for that. So if you're just repeating, in fact, I'll give you a little demo of that, right? So if you open your packet, I'm trying to figure out, I'm on the lieutenant's packet here. I'm looking at the cultural and relational competencies. If I say, I always build relationships and I work effectively with people from diverse backgrounds, and I demonstrate empathy, I help and serve others respective of who they are or what they do, and I really work hard to remove barriers, and I effectively address complex situations. I'm always flexible and innovative, and I adapt my tools. You see what I'm doing there? I'm just taking the buzzwords out of the competency statement, and I'm just repeating them. You have to provide supporting detail underneath that to show how you did those things and what you did and what you accomplished as a result. Okay, so don't just repeat the buzzwords. Okay, so the raters have a list of behavioral dimensions they're looking for. So they have, for each competency, they have a list of things that they're looking for. They're looking to match up your evidence to what's on their sheet. That's how you get your score on the action score. Okay, so we also score your communication skills. In the group, the subject matter expert group, they said that both written and oral communication is important for both positions, so we score it. And you get up to 40 points overall. So that's not per question, that's overall. You get up to 40 points for your speaking and writing skills. So 40 for the written, 40 for the oral. And you know, we've got some tips on that for the workshop this afternoon. There's a lot on that for those of you. I think you're all registered to come, so that's great if you can be here. But it's important. So whatever you can do, join Toastmasters, practice, videotape yourself, get in front of a mirror, talk to your dog, you know, whatever you can do to practice your orals. Write some essays. Read them back to yourself. What I do when I write, I do a lot of writing, I write something and then I'll read it out loud to myself, which helps me, I gotta watch my time, which helps me really hear what I'm saying and writing as well. Okay, now I want to just point out because it's different for lieutenant and sergeant. So let me get that. I'll go to lieutenants first. After your competency on that scoring sheet, and there's a list of tips here. I'm not going to go through them one by one. You folks can all read. You'll see that we have the 40 points possible for the communication skills, and in the essay part, there are going to be three essay assignments or questions, and that's a total of 210 points plus 40 for writing. So that's 250 points for the essay. For the lieutenant, there are going to be 7 oral board questions, and so the possible points are 530 and 780 possible points, and the pass point is 70% of that total. For the sergeants, it's a little different. There's going to be 6 oral board questions and 2 written. So the total points are a little different, but they're listed in your packet. Okay, I'm going to take 30 seconds here and ask for any questions, and then we'll move on. Anything?
Are the interviewers or the raters, are they also trained in this process?
Yes, we do a rater training, and they're trained on what to look for, how to gather evidence, and I'm in the room facilitating and I make sure that they follow that they're consistent. The most important thing is the way the raters apply the scoring model is consistent from candidate to candidate to candidate. And we'll talk more about this afternoon. Raters have different communication styles and different ways they interpret information. And that's a good thing, by the way, because you all have different communication styles. So the reason we have multiple people in a panel is so they can all get the evidence and then they discuss it. They come to some agreement about, they have a chance to change their scores. They're trained. I watch for them to follow the model, and then they reach they reach where they want to be at the end, and the score is averaged, and that's this consensus score. So multiple raters, all trained, and all follow the process. So I hope I answered your question. Yes. Any other questions before we move on?
I just jumped in. Is the resume template the same for lieutenant and sergeant?
Yeah, the templates are the same. Yeah. Why does it say sergeant on your lieutenant one, or
it says
lieutenant on your sergeant one? Yeah, sorry. That's a good catch. But the templates are the same, right? The only difference here is that the lieutenants will get 3 and the sergeants get 2. Okay, so let's go through that now. The written assignment. I'll get to that in my handout, so I make sure I cover all the points. Base process, and there are 2 essay questions. So, something like, tell me about a time, describe something you did, what did you do? I mean, it's going to ask you about something that happened, right, that you did. Plus, there will be 1 resume essay exercise that gives you a little more freedom about what you discuss. And I'll show you how that's going to work in a second. The instructions are in your packet, and it's the same for sergeant and lieutenant. What that looks like is we're going to give you a competency statement, right? You're going to prepare a resume in advance, and you're going to bring the resume, and when you get there, you'll see the competency statement, and I'm not going to tell you which one it is, but you'll see the competency statement, and you go, okay, based on that competency statement, I'll pull stuff from my resume that I want to write an essay about. So you get to pick the items from your resume that you want to write about. You plug those into a table, which I'll show you in a minute, and then you write an essay about what you've done to serve using those items from your resume. I'll explain that in a minute. But so there's 2 behavioral-based questions for lieutenant and 1 resume essay exercise. For sergeant, there's 1 essay question, tell me about a time, and 1 resume essay. So depending on which position you're applying for. Okay. General guidelines on your handout, and it's the same for both, with a couple of exceptions if you're a sergeant versus lieutenant. Still use the SARA model. No matter, in every one of our questions or exercises, use the SARA model. Remembering that a majority of your score are your actions, right? You're gonna come into a computer lab somewhere or a room of computers. They're gonna all be set up. This isn't a computing test. But your ability to type and write is important, and so you use that in your job. So you might, if you need to, practice your typing skills. You'll have, I think, plenty of time to write it. We've never gotten a complaint about the amount of time. You're going to have 1 hour to address each question. Now, we don't time each question, but if you've got 3 as a lieutenant, you got 3 hours to respond. The clock will start, you write, and at the end of 3 hours, you have to stop typing. You can still print after that, but you got to stop typing. We'll make sure that the computers are working, they're set up, the documents are pre-formatted, they're loaded, they're ready to go. We'll be there, to help if there's a technical issue. And I sit in the room and I try, or somebody will be there, and if there is an issue, I think normally the departments have some way to get some help if there's a technical problem. But the idea is that you can just stay focused on what you want to write, not on whether it's a computer issue. So we get everything set up, we come in, you write for 3 hours, you save your work, save your work, save your work. I can't say it often enough, save your work. I had somebody one time that overwrote their file and it really screwed them up. So you gotta know how to save a document, know how to use Word, Microsoft Word, and save your work. So at the end, you print it out, you turn it in, and that's it. Now, with the resume essay, and I'll repeat this in a minute, it is really helpful and important and critical, I would say critical, for you to bring two printed copies of your resume. Two. Because I'm going to take one and keep it. If you don't bring the second one, you'll have nothing to work with on your resume essay exercise. You need to bring two copies, one for me, one for you. And they don't have to be fancy. Plain paper, follow the format that we're going to go through in a minute, but plain paper, not fancy is fine. It's not about, your resume is not scored other than whether or not you followed the instructions and you actually brought one. And you followed the instructions on what to do with it. I'm not going to go through and score each thing on your resume. That's not what this is about. It's a working tool for you. It's so that you have a record of your accomplishments and what you've done, and you can use that when you get to the exercise, right, which I'll show you in a second. We don't use the resume essay. I've been asked this a number of times. We don't use that on the behavioral-based questions specifically, right? So if you're a lieutenant, on the 2 behavioral-based questions that we ask, you don't use your resume on that, although we found that if you've done it, it is a helpful thing, but we don't use it. It's not part of that. It's only part of that one resume essay exercise, okay? No electronic devices or notes, so you can't bring anything in with you. I mean, this is all in your packet, but if you bring something with you other than your resume, you can't bring it in. No phones, no recording devices. Look at the rules and follow the rules. And there are some tips there which, in the interest of time, I won't go through. All right, so on page 8 of your packet, let's just take another look real quick. It's a little repetitive, but I'll give you the resume essay assignment. There's a template on the next 2 pages, pages 9 and 10, and I'll send Tim a file, and I'll send that to him later today or tomorrow, but you'll get it, the template. I'll try to do it today so that you can have it right away. It'll look like this, right? Only it won't have any Nike stuff or anything on it. You'll get the template, right, by email. Use the template. And all you have to do is just overwrite the text that's in there and start typing, right? And use a numbered format so I can see that your items are numbered. And if you just hit the enter key once, it's set up so that it will automatically number your items all the way through. It's already formatted. So just have a numbered list. Because what I'm going to do when you bring it in to the test, when I go to score it with, well, I don't score it, when the raters score it, I look for what you put in the box and make sure that it's there, and I find your number. I'll show you that in a second. So you're gonna fill out on the template. If you look at this page right here, that's page 10 on the. I think I have the 10 this one. Yeah, page 10. You can see you're going to put your name and date up there. You're going to come up with as many items as you want for areas of responsibilities and positions held, experience, accomplishments, education and training, community involvement. You see how it's a numbered list. If you just overwrite the text in those fields, when you get it, it'll automatically be a numbered list. And you can go up to 2 pages total. Don't bring more than 2 pages. But whatever you want to put in there, things you've done, experience, education, just build a resume. Right, for things you've done. Okay? Go to this page with the next page. So when you get to the essay test the day of, this is what it's going to look like, something like this. There will be, where it says sample competency number 1, there will be a paragraph there. It'll be a competency statement. It'll be one of the competency statements that's in your handout today. It's in your packet. It'll be right there instead of using computers. I picked something that we're not going to test for, obviously, using computers, but you can see. So there's a competency statement. Eugene police lieutenants are adept at, or sergeants adept at using computers. They can write code, draft original documents, rebuild computers, repair mainframes, and troubleshoot computer viruses. That's probably just fiction. But you can see that's where a competency statement will be. You take things from your resume and you put them in the blue and white box, right, that relate to what you've done to use computers. And a sample is shown here, right? This candidate says, I'm going to write an essay about my master's degree and what I did with that, and how I was a supervisor at the Nike IT support desk, right? So they chose those 2 items from their resume and put them in the box. Then, in part B, that's where you're going to write an essay, right? You're going to say, when I got a master's degree, and here's what I did with that. I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and this was the results, and that's how my degree helped me in my job. You know, I'm making it simple, but same format, SARA, situation, action, results, application. Here's the item from my resume. I'm writing an essay about what I did with that to serve the department or the community in support of the law enforcement profession. It's pretty simple. You take your resume item and you write an essay about what you did with that. And the way that we look at that is, if I was an auto mechanic and I had every tool in the book and I owned an auto repair shop and I had gone through 20 years of school, does that mean I can fix your car? Anybody? Does that mean I can fix a car? No, but if I tell you I've got all the tools and the education as a certified mechanic, and I've fixed 500 BMWs, and every one of them has run well, and my customers have commended me, and I've won awards from, you know, some auto or whatever, that would tell you that my training and education and tools mean something. So your resume are the tools. We want you to put your tools in the box, what your tools are, and then we want to know what you did with those tools. We want to know what you accomplished with your resume items. If you put it in the box, you got to write about it in your resume. So be prepared. If you put 15 things in here, and you can expand this box out when you get there, if you put 15 things, they all have to be written about in your resume to score well. So choose carefully. Pick the things that mean something, put them in the box, and then write an essay about it. All right, now, this seems complicated. Study the instructions. Write me or Tim with any questions you might have. But here's the great part about this exercise, and people have told me afterwards that they like this the best, because you get to pick what you talk about, right? It's a chance for you to take the things from your career and let it shine. This is your opportunity to do that. The other questions we ask, we're telling you what we want to know. This is where you're telling us what you want us to know. So there's a lot more freedom, but we built it this way because it's behavioral based. It's got to be about a situation. You put real situations in there, real actions, real results, and how it qualifies. Same thing. And you'll get up to 2 pages per exercise or question. So you get up to 2 pages. You get 2 pages. All right, so in and out, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. Any questions on that? Because that's a lot to chew on. Go through the instructions. Any questions on that? Okay. Next page is the oral board. So you've got the competency statements, you've prepared, you come into the day of the test, we'll give you a handout with the questions on it and a place to take notes. You'll have lieutenants will have 35 minutes, sergeants will have 30 minutes. 6 questions, 7 questions. So it averages out to 5 minutes per question to prepare, right? And you want to give us a prepare for a specific situation, clear detailed actions, supporting detail, what your results were, relevant results, and how what you did qualifies you and has answered the question and the competency. So use the SARE model, prepare thoroughly, manage your time well. You'll get that time. You can bring your notes in with you into the process, into the interview, right? And what will happen is I'll ask a question, I'll start the clock. You're speaking and you're giving us your response, the clock's running. As soon as you're done with that response, the clock stops. So you get, the lieutenants will get 35 minutes to respond, and that's talk time. Now you can't delay a lot in between. You know, when the raters are ready to go for the next question, I'll ask the next question. But the clock is not running while they're scoring. So you'll answer, they'll score, the clock is stopped. When they're scoring, the clock is stopped. So you can use that time if you want to prepare for the next question, right? Regroup, cover your thoughts, and be prepared. So clock starts, you answer, clock stops, they score. Questions asked, clock starts, you answer, clock stops, they score. And you keep repeating that. Now if you have any time left over at the end, you can go back and add to or clarify a response. Do that judiciously, and sometimes I've seen, I like to put it this way, if a candidate's already in a hole, put the shovel down, right? If you, you try to go back and add anything and it's not really of value, like you come back and add your philosophy, that's not going to help you any. If you have to go back, that's fine, but bring actions, results, relevant information that will help them add to your score, not just fluff, right? So it's good to go back if you need to. Sometimes candidates forget, they go back through their notes and go, oh, I wish I'd have covered that. I'd like to go back to question 3. That's fine, but bring something that matters if you're going to do that, right? Don't frustrate the raters with empty information. But you get to go back. It will be up to you to manage your time. Okay, I will give you one warning at about 5 minutes remaining if you need it. Other than that, time management is your responsibility. And I get asked all the time, how much time do I have? I can't tell you. You'll get one warning with about 5 minutes remaining if you need it. So and you can't bring any recording devices in, so if you need something, a stopwatch is fine, but nothing that can take pictures or record, right? So a stopwatch, if your watch has a stopwatch feature, that's fine. A watch on the table, although watches on the table don't stop and start. You can't stop and start them. So whatever you need to do to manage your time well, it's a good tip to make sure that you manage your time well. If you get to the 5 minutes remaining and you've got 3 questions left, then you got to answer 3 questions effectively in a couple minutes. It's not going to be easy. And I've seen it happen. All right, I've seen it happen. So know how long 5 minutes per question is and manage your time well. And a sample question. So what does a behavioral-based question look like? Something like, again, fictitious example because we don't use anything that might be in the test. Describe a time that exemplifies your ability to troubleshoot and repair complex computer and IT issues. Right? So tell me about a time. Describe a time. Those are behavioral-based questions. You got to come up with a good situation, action, results, and how it qualifies you. And use the SARA model in everything you do. Give us that information. And then there's some tips there. I can't tell you how helpful videotaping yourself might be because you can't believe it's hard to do, hard to watch sometimes. But I don't like watching myself on a video, but it really does help. All right, so there's going to be an essay, there's going to be a resume essay, and there's going to be an oral board. And they're all behavioral based. Follow the SARA model for everything. Read your instruction packet. Send Tim any questions, and we'll answer any questions, or we'll try. Maybe there's something we can't, but we'll try our best to answer any questions you might have. We want you all to succeed if you can. We want you to do well to the best of your ability. So, any questions? I've given you a lot, I know, but something to chew on. Any questions?
So I do. Just
Yes.
confirming. So the questions that are in the oral board are coming from these 8 or 7 different.
In any combination, yeah.
In any combination.
Right.
Usually one area or multitudes of areas.
Typically, the questions, and I can't remember specifically, but I think all the questions each relate to one competency, and from any place in that competency. So I don't think we have any ones that are assessing multiple competencies at the same time. They're all, I think, geared toward one, but I'd have to go back and confirm that. But they're all related. Everything we do is going to be related to content found in those competency statements. And those are the voice of your employer, right? So they told us what's important, and we'll talk later on today about how those were developed. But they told us what's important, and all we did is just record that and then write questions and scoring dimensions that relate to what they said was important. Your job is simply to bring us evidence about what you've done and the results you've achieved that demonstrate the same things they're looking for as it relates to the question. So to simplify everything I just told you, that's it in a nutshell. All right? Did I answer your question?
You
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Earlier, you said that we'd be able to bring notes with us and in the oral board section. It says no outside material in the test prep.
Correct. So no, thank you. That's a good question for clarification. When you get there, you can't bring anything that you brought from home into the process. You have to leave any portfolios, your phone, no recording devices, nothing that you brought with you. But we'll give you the questions and a place to take notes, and that you can bring into the oral board, right? So you can bring what we give you into the oral board. So you've got 35 minutes or 30 minutes to take notes and think about your accomplishments and what you've done and the results and how it qualifies you to get promoted. You can think about all that, make your notes, come in, and then you can refer to your notes during the interview, right? So it's not like, it shouldn't be a huge surprise because you've had 3 or 4 weeks to prepare, you get there, and if you've done your prep work and you've thought about your career and you've mapped that out, you should have content to come up with for those examples. Now, there are possibilities that not everybody in the room has done things in their career. They've had the opportunity, that's one of the things we look for to make it fair, but have they done them and they've gone to the extra effort? And that's up to you when you get there. But you can bring those notes in, but not the notes from home. Did I answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? No. Well, wow, 2 minutes left. Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention. I know I gave you a lot, but do let me know if you have any questions. We want to be there for you. And with that, the briefing is concluded.